At 30,000 feet, with death knocking on the cabin door, a 12-year-old girl fought to save a stranger who somehow knew everything about her. "Don't you die on me." Maya Blake's small hands trembled as she pressed them against the chest of the unconscious man sprawled across 3 first-class seats. The plane lurched violently to the right, sending an empty oxygen mask swinging like a pendulum above her head. Panic erupted throughout the cabin. Screams, prayers, the thuds of luggage falling from overhead bins, but Maya heard none of it. Her world had narrowed to the ashen face of Julian Blackwell, the cold, distant millionaire who had barely acknowledged her existence when she'd boarded Flight 2187 just 3 hours earlier. "Please," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks as she continued compressions. "You can't die without telling me why. Why did you have that photo? Why were you watching me?" 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, as the aircraft battled the worst turbulence the pilot had seen in 27 years, a 12-year-old girl from the poorest trailer park in Kentucky fought to save the life of a man worth more than her entire community combined. She had no idea that his next words, if he lived to speak them, would unravel everything she believed about her past. Maya clutched her backpack tightly against her chest as she shuffled down the narrow aisle of the Boeing 777. Each step deeper into the cabin felt like stepping into an alien world. The soft blue lighting, the hushed conversations, the flight attendants with their perfect smiles and crisp uniforms, it was all so far removed from her daily life in Briar Hollow, Kentucky, that she might as well have been walking on the moon. "Excuse me, honey." A flight attendant with a name tag that read Sandra gently touched Maya's shoulder. "Are you traveling alone?" Maya nodded, her throat too dry to answer. The woman's eyes softened with concern, and something else. Was it pity? Maya had seen that look countless times, especially since Grandma Ruth had gotten sick. "Let me see your boarding pass," Sandra said, extending her hand. Her red nails gleamed under the cabin lights. She studied the paper and raised an eyebrow. "Seat 14A, that's right. This way, sweetie." As they passed the curtain separating first class from economy, Maya couldn't help but glance at the passengers in the premium section. Most were absorbed in laptops or reclined with eye masks in place, but one man caught her attention. Unlike the others, he wasn't working or resting. He sat perfectly still, staring out the window with such intensity, Maya wondered if he could see something no one else could. He looked to be in his early 60s, his silver hair stark against a tailored black suit, a heavy gold watch peeked from beneath a starched cuff, and a leather briefcase sat between his polished shoes. Everything about him radiated wealth and control, yet something about his expression struck Maya, a flicker of vulnerability, maybe even regret. Before she could decide, the man turned and met her gaze. For one electric moment their eyes locked. His expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something she couldn't quite name. Then as quickly as it began, he looked away, his face hardening into a mask of indifference. This flight, her first ever, wasn't something Maya had planned or saved for. It had come by certified mail 3 weeks ago, along with a prepaid ticket and a brief cryptic note. "Your presence is requested in Boston regarding an inheritance matter. All expenses paid, discretion advised." Grandma Ruth had been suspicious from the start. "Sounds like one of those scams on the news," she'd said, her voice raspy from cigarettes and, lately, chemo. Nobody leaves money to people they don't know. But the letter contained details, very specific ones, about Maya's father. Details only someone who truly knew him could have known. Her father, Elijah Blake, who had died when she was just 4 years old. A man she remembered more as a feeling than a face. Warm hands, a low, comforting laugh, the smell of peppermint and motor oil. After weeks of back and forth with the Boston law firm, Langston, Price & Ward, attorneys at law since 1972, and a visit from a notary confirming the documents were legitimate, Grandma Ruth finally agreed. "Just be careful," she warned, as the medical transport took her to another round of treatments. "The world ain't always kind to girls who look like you, especially when they're alone." Those words echoed in Maya's mind as the plane began to taxi. She was 12 years old, flying across state lines to meet strangers who claimed she was entitled to something left by someone connected to her father. It sounded like one of the mystery novels she devoured from the mobile library that came to the trailer park every other Thursday. Only this time, it wasn't fiction, it was her life, and it was taking a turn she never saw coming. The engines roared, pressing her back into her seat. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing heart. Whatever awaited in Boston, she would face it with the same strength that had seen her through everything else: her father's death, her mother's disappearance 3 years later, and the difficult, beautiful love of a grandmother whose body was failing, but whose spirit was fierce. As the plane lifted into the sky, Maya felt a strange cocktail of fear and hope. She was leaving behind the familiar: the worn trailer with the leaking roof, Mr. Ellis's corner store where she sometimes got an extra candy bar for being a good student, the community center where she waited when grandma had doctor's appointments, and her school where teachers praised her brilliance but scolded her for attitude when she questioned their low expectations. But there was freedom in this too. For a few days, she wouldn't just be that Blake girl with the second-hand shoes and the missing parents. She would be a traveler, an adventurer, someone with a mysterious summons in a faraway city. The thought made her smile, despite her nerves. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers settled into the 3-hour journey. Some pulled out tablets, others sipped drinks. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out a battered copy of The Secret Garden, a book that had once belonged to her father. Its margins were filled with his handwriting. On days she missed him most, she'd read those notes and imagined him sitting where she sat now, his thoughts reaching across time to meet hers. She had just flipped to her bookmarked page when a commotion in first class caught her attention. The man with the silver hair, Julian Blackwell, was standing now, his voice raised in displeasure. "This is unacceptable," he barked at a flustered flight attendant. "I specifically requested a vacant seat beside me. I'm not accustomed to sharing my space." "I understand, Mr. Blackwell," the attendant replied, her smile straining. "But with today's configuration, this is the best we can do. Mr. Vaughan is also a Platinum Elite member." "Do you know who I am?" Blackwell asked, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "One call to corporate and—" "Julian, please," said the other man in a grey suit. "If it matters that much, I'll move." "That's not the point, Nathan," Blackwell replied sharply. "It's about honoring commitments." Maya rolled her eyes. The problems of the rich. Here was a man angry about sharing in first class, while she was thankful just to have a row to herself in economy. But something about the exchange caught her attention. The way Blackwell had said Nathan, with a strange familiarity. And the other man, Mr. Vaughan, carried himself with tension, like someone with history. Eventually, a flight attendant escorted Nathan Vaughan to a different seat, leaving Blackwell to his precious solitude. As he sat, his gaze swept the cabin, and once again locked with Maya's. This time, she didn't look away. His entitlement made her want to challenge him. She held his stare, and to her surprise, he was the one to blink, turning away to speak with the attendant. She returned to her book, but the words were blurry. Her mind kept going back to his face. Not the arrogance, not the irritation, but something else. Recognition. But that was impossible. What could Julian Blackwell, who couldn't stand to sit near strangers, possibly recognize in a girl from Briar Hollow in hand-me-down clothes? She nearly laughed. The journey was clearly messing with her imagination. She forced her eyes back to the page, back to the story of another orphan girl navigating a strange world. Then an hour later, as the attendants served drinks, she saw Blackwell rise again. This time he strode toward the front lavatory with purpose. As he passed the curtain dividing first class from economy, something fell from his jacket pocket, a small folded piece of paper. It fluttered to the carpeted floor just beyond the partition. Without thinking, Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and slipped into the aisle. She bent and picked up the paper. She intended to return it immediately. Maybe it was important. A business card, a receipt, a note. But as she stood holding the folded square, a strange impulse overtook her. Later, Emma would question what impulse had driven her to cross a line she knew better than to cross. What quiet, urgent instinct told her to act? But in that suspended moment, standing alone in the narrow airplane aisle, unseen, she carefully unfolded the piece of paper. It wasn't a boarding pass, not a receipt, not a business card. It was a photograph, worn at the edges, folded so many times the creases had frayed. An image blurred slightly by time, but still unmistakably clear. A young couple standing arm in arm in front of a modest white clapboard house. They were smiling, broadly, openly, like the world hadn't yet shown them its weight. The woman was petite, her hair cropped short, a deep dimple in her right cheek as she laughed toward the camera. The man beside her was tall, lean, wearing weathered jeans and a faded University of Kentucky t-shirt. Emma's heart jolted. That dimple, she saw it every morning in the mirror. And the man, there was no mistaking him. Even after all these years, even after the funeral. It was her father. Her hands began to tremble violently, the photo nearly slipping from her grasp. Why would William Harrison, the white, reclusive millionaire, be carrying a photo of her parents? They looked so young, barely older than college students. The image must have been taken long before Emma was born, before her father died, before her mother disappeared. The bathroom door opened. Startled, Emma quickly folded the photo and stepped out of view, slipping back toward her seat, mind racing. Harrison emerged. His expression flickered, something almost like worry shadowing his face. He paused at his seat, patting his suit jacket, then the pockets of his slacks, scanning the floor with narrowed eyes. Emma sat, tucking the photo into her trembling hand. Her chest tightened. She should return it, she knew that. But how could she explain having seen it, recognized it, without asking the question that now burned inside her like a live coal? How did you know my parents? Harrison remained on his feet, his movements becoming more agitated. He flagged down a flight attendant, murmuring urgently. Within minutes, multiple crew members were discreetly scanning the first-class cabin floor, eyes darting beneath seats. Emma pressed back into her own, heart pounding like a guilty drumbeat. She felt like a thief, not of the photo, but of the truth it held, a truth that somehow tethered her to the man she'd boarded this plane to meet. This man who now seemed far more than just a name on a mysterious letter. She made a decision. She would return the photo, but not yet. She needed answers first. Who was William Harrison to her family? And what did it have to do with the inheritance waiting for her in Boston? She carefully tucked the photo into the pages of The Secret Garden, just beneath the spot she'd been reading. Whatever this was, it would take time to untangle. Suddenly the plane jolted, sharp enough that her stomach lurched, and a few gasps rippled through the cabin. The seatbelt sign blinked on with a soft chime. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking," came the calm voice overhead. "We're experiencing some light turbulence as we pass through a weather system. I've turned on the seatbelt sign as a precaution. We expect smoother air shortly." Emma fumbled for her belt, buckling it with automatic movements, but her mind was elsewhere, still caught between the photo and the man searching frantically for it. The plane pitched again, harder this time. A few drinks spilled. A baby wailed somewhere behind her. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the fuselage seemed to sway. She gripped the armrests. Hard. It was her first real taste of fear on this flight, not fear of secrets or photos or millionaires, but of altitude, of gravity, of the sheer vulnerability of being hurtled through the sky in a tin can thousands of feet above the earth. "It's perfectly normal," came a gentle voice beside her. Emma turned. An elderly woman had taken the aisle seat, likely while Emma had been lost in the photo earlier. She had silver-grey hair tucked into a soft bob and wore a lavender sweater set that looked like something Grandma Martha would wear to church. Her face was warm, lined, but sharp-eyed. "I've been flying since the 70s. The woman said with a light southern accent. "Back when folks smoked on planes and they served you real meals with metal forks on china plates. A little bump in the air's nothing to fret over." She extended a small tin of peppermints. "These help with ear pressure and nerves." Emma accepted one gratefully. "Thanks, I'm Emma." "Grace," the woman said, smiling. "Grace Sullivan. You on your first flight?" Emma nodded, a little embarrassed at how obvious it must be. Grace's smile softened. "Well, you picked a beautiful day. Once we clear these clouds, the view will be worth it. You headed to Boston for fun or family?" Emma hesitated. How could she explain the whirlwind of uncertainty that had put her on this plane? It's complicated," she said at last. "Sort of family business?" Grace nodded sagely. "Family business usually is." She reached to adjust her seatbelt. "I'm visiting my son and his husband. They've been up in Boston for 5 years now. He's in finance. Real driven. They've been begging me to visit, and I finally said yes. 75th birthday next week. Happy early birthday, Emma said, grateful for the diversion. Thank you, sweetheart. You remind me of my granddaughter. She's 17, but she's got that same look, always watching, taking things in, not missing a beat. Grace's tone shifted just slightly, not pitying, but perceptive. That awareness, it'll serve you well. Especially when you've had to grow up faster than most. There was something about the way she said it, like she knew, not from guesswork, but from lived experience. Emma felt seen in a way that made her both comforted and exposed. As the plane climbed, it finally broke through the storm. Light poured in. The cabin, moments ago cloaked in dim greys, now shimmered in golden sunshine. The clouds outside stretched endlessly, a cotton kingdom floating beneath them. Told you it'd be worth it, Grace said, gesturing toward the window. Emma stared in quiet awe. For a moment, the knot of tension inside her eased. She was just a girl flying for the first time. Not a question mark, not a secret, just someone sharing the sky with a stranger kind enough to notice her. Then, a sudden commotion from the front. Voices, sharp and urgent. Movement, a flight attendant rushing toward first class. Passengers sat up straighter, whispering, craning their necks to look forward. "Excuse me," Grace said to a passing attendant, her voice calm but firm. "Is everything all right up there?" The young man offered a trained smile. Just a passenger feeling a bit unwell. Nothing serious. But his face said something different. Emma's heart stuttered. Harrison. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. It wasn't just any passenger. It had to be him. The photo, the panic, the search. A chill slid down her spine. Was this about the photo? About her? Had she set something in motion without meaning to? Magical thinking, she reminded herself. Grandma Martha used to gently warn her against believing her thoughts could cause real-world harm. But still, "I should see if they need help," Grace said suddenly, unbuckling. "Ma'am, please remain seated," the flight attendant said, appearing beside them again. Grace fixed him with a look of unyielding authority. "I was a nurse for 47 years. Critical care. Now is it cardiac, seizure, allergic reaction?" He hesitated. Then, from further up, another voice called, "We need the medical kit now." That was enough. The attendant sprinted away. Grace rose with surprising agility and made for the front. Emma, without even thinking, followed. "Emma, honey, stay in your seat," Grace called over her shoulder. But Emma couldn't. Something deeper than curiosity pulled her forward. A thread she couldn't cut, one that tugged her toward the man in first class, toward the truth. As they reached the partition, Emma caught sight of him, Harrison, slumped in his seat, face pale, eyes half-lidded. A flight attendant pressed an oxygen mask to his face while the man from earlier, James Thorne, Emma remembered, held him upright. "Possible cardiac event," someone said. "Does anyone have aspirin?" "Sir, can you hear me?" Emma hovered near the edge of the scene, her breath caught. Then Harrison stirred. His eyes blinked open, unfocused, dazed, until they locked onto her. Recognition, sharp, immediate. His hand lifted toward her, weak and shaking, lips moving behind the mask. Reaching. Before she could move, Grace stepped in, commanding the space like a general. "I'm a registered nurse, let me through." The crew parted as she knelt beside Harrison, checking vitals. He tried to sit up, eyes still locked on Emma. "Sir, you need to stay calm," Grace said gently, guiding him back. But Emma couldn't look away, because in that desperate gaze, something deeper shone through. Not just recognition, urgency, like a man who had run out of time and just spotted the one person he was never supposed to meet. Harrison's eyes locked on Emma, fierce, urgent, pleading. With effort that seemed to drain the last of his strength, he yanked his oxygen mask aside. "The photo," he rasped, barely audible. "Please." A flight attendant leaned in immediately, replacing the mask over his face. But not before Emma heard it, his voice cracking through the chaos, confirming what she feared and needed to know. The photo. The one of her parents. "What photo?" Grace asked, checking Harrison's pulse with practiced fingers, her brows drawn tight with concern. Harrison weakly shook his head but never looked away from Emma. His gaze clung to her, raw and wild, as if he was trying to will the truth into her. "Young lady," James Thornton's voice was sharp but concerned, cutting through the mounting tension as he addressed Emma directly. "Do you know what he's talking about?" She froze, eyes wide, heart hammering. All eyes turned to her. She could feel their weight, the passengers, the flight crew, Grace, waiting, expecting, judging. If she told the truth, she'd have to admit to taking something that wasn't hers, a stolen glimpse into someone else's life. But if she lied, she could be withholding something that mattered, something a dying man needed to say. Before she could speak, the plane jolted hard, like it had hit something invisible. A low, sickening groan echoed through the fuselage. People stumbled. Someone screamed. The turbulence was back, and this time it wasn't subtle. The cabin lights flickered wildly before going out. Then, with a mechanical hiss, oxygen masks dropped from above, swinging eerily in front of startled passengers like ghostly pendulums. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," crackled the intercom. "We've encountered severe turbulence. All passengers and crew must return to their seats and fasten seatbelts immediately. I repeat, return to your seats now." The gravity in the captain's voice, strained, urgent, cut through even the panic. This wasn't routine. A flight attendant leaned in to Grace, who was still by Harrison's side, and they exchanged rushed words about his condition. "Come on, Emma," Grace said, grabbing her arm. "We need to get back." But as they turned, Harrison lunged. His hand shot out and grabbed Emma's wrist with startling strength, his skin cold, but his grip vice-like. "Wait, please." His voice was ragged through the oxygen, his mask askew. "Important." "Sir, let go of her," a flight attendant said firmly, trying to intervene. "You need to keep your mask on." But Harrison wouldn't release her. His bloodshot eyes bore into Emma's like he was trying to reach into her soul. "Thomas and Sarah," he whispered hoarsely. Emma's breath caught. "Her parents' names. Their daughter." He started to say more, but the words were lost. The plane dropped, a violent plunge, as if the ground itself had vanished. Passengers shrieked. Items flew. A drink cart toppled over, spilling soda and snacks across the aisle. Then, slam! The plane stabilized with a bone-rattling jolt. In the chaos, Harrison's grip slipped from Emma's wrist. Flight attendants rushed back to him, strapping his mask securely and securing his seatbelt. The entire first-class section was a blur of motion and fear. Grace grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her back toward economy. "Seatbelt, now!" she said in her nurse voice, firm, unyielding. Emma obeyed, snapping the buckle into place with trembling fingers. Her mind, though, wasn't on the storm, not even on the dive they'd just survived. It was on the words Harrison had spoken. Thomas, Sarah, her parents. He knew them. He recognized her. And whatever he wanted to say, it mattered to him more than his own life. The lights failed completely. For a breathless stretch of seconds, darkness swallowed the cabin until emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie blue glow. The swinging oxygen masks made it feel like they were trapped inside some nightmarish underwater vessel. "Is this normal?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the creaking metal and cries of frightened passengers. Grace reached over and squeezed her hand. "No, sweetheart, it's not. But planes like this, they're built strong. We're going to be okay." Emma clung to that reassurance like it was a life raft. She counted each second, each breath, as the plane continued its bucking journey through the storm. Then came the captain's voice again, tighter, strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are diverting to Portland International Airport in Maine due to severe turbulence and a medical emergency on board. Estimated landing in approximately 40 minutes. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Portland? They weren't even close to Boston. Whatever was happening to Harrison, it was bad enough to change the course of the flight. Emma's hand went to her backpack. She thought of the photo, now carefully hidden inside her book. The look in Harrison's eyes. The trembling way he'd said her parents' names. It was all connected. Somehow, the storm outside began to fade as they descended, but inside the plane, the tension only grew. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, checking passengers, offering comfort. But each time they returned from first class, their faces looked graver. Next to her, Grace had fallen silent, but Emma noticed the older woman was clutching her crucifix, lips moving in silent prayer. Finally, Emma spoke. "Do you think Mr. Harrison's going to be okay?" Grace turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. "You know him?" "No," Emma said softly. "But he knew my parents. I think he was trying to tell me something important." Grace looked at her carefully, like she was reevaluating everything. Before she could respond, the captain's voice returned. We are beginning our final descent. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin." Landing instructions followed. Everyone sat straighter. The silence thickened. Emma looked out the window. The clouds thinned, revealing a jagged coastline and the small airport below. The plane's descent was sharp, urgent. Emma's ears popped despite the peppermint Grace had given her. The wheels hit the runway with a jarring bounce. Screech, bounce, slam. Rain lashed the windows. Emergency lights flashed outside. Red and blue bursts through the haze. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed at Portland International," the captain said. "Time is 2:17 p.m. Medical personnel are boarding. Please remain seated." Almost immediately, the forward door opened. Cold air swept into the cabin, bringing with it the scent of rain and jet fuel. Paramedics boarded swiftly, guided toward first class. Emma strained to see, but the partition blocked her view. "They're taking him off," a passenger whispered nearby. "He doesn't look good." Emma's heart stuttered. No, he couldn't leave yet. He hadn't told her what he knew. Before she knew what she was doing, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. "Emma!" Grace tried to stop her. "You can't—" But Emma slipped into the aisle. A flight attendant moved to block her. "Miss, you must return to your seat." "Please," Emma said, her voice cracking. "It's about my parents. I need to speak to Mr. Harrison." The attendant hesitated, but then a commotion in first class, raised voices, then Harrison's voice, raspy, urgent. "The girl! I need to speak to the girl." A paramedic appeared at the curtain. "Is there a young girl here?" "He's asking for someone." Emma stepped forward. "Me? I think it's me." "You know this man?" the paramedic asked. Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out her book. From between its pages, she unfolded the photograph with trembling hands. "He dropped this. It's a photo of my parents." The paramedic studied her, then nodded. "Come quickly." First class smelled of antiseptic and stress. Harrison lay on a stretcher, mask back over his face, an IV in his arm. He looked pale, too pale, but his eyes locked on to Emma the second she entered. "Sir," a medic said, "we have to move now." "1 minute," Harrison croaked, tugging the mask away. "Private." After a tense pause, the crew stepped back slightly, giving them space. Emma approached, the photo in hand. "I found this," she said. "Why do you have a picture of my parents?" Harrison struggled for breath, his chest heaving. "Not much time," he whispered. "Listen, carefully." Emma leaned closer. His breath was shallow, barely more than air. He whispered a sentence, and when Emma heard it, truly heard it, her world split apart. She pulled back sharply. "That's not possible. You're lying." Harrison weakly shook his head. "Ask your grandmother about July 17th, 1992. She knows." His hand fumbled inside his jacket. "Take this." He pressed something into her palm, a small, cold key. "Boston. Lawyers will help." Then the monitors shrieked. "He's crashing!" a paramedic shouted. "Move!" Emma was pulled aside as the stretcher was rushed down the aisle, crew and medics in coordinated, frantic motion. She stood frozen. Rain hammered the windows. The key in her hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Whatever truth Harrison had carried was now hers to uncover. The stretcher bumped over the aircraft threshold, and just like that, Harrison was gone, rushed into the waiting arms of paramedics and flashing lights. Emma didn't move. She stood rooted to the cabin floor, fingers clutching the old key in one hand and the faded photo in the other. Her tears fell silently, unnoticed even by her own senses. Her heart was hammering, but everything around her felt suspended in slow motion, as if the air had thickened with something invisible but heavy. The words Harrison had whispered before slipping into unconsciousness kept echoing, fracturing everything she thought she knew about her life. "He's my father." 1 sentence, 5 words, and her entire world had shifted beneath her feet. She didn't feel the hand at first, a gentle touch on her shoulder. Then came the voice, quiet and knowing. "What did he say to you, child?" Emma turned. It was Grace, her wise eyes full of concern, lips drawn into a soft, unreadable line. She wasn't prying, she was offering. Emma's voice cracked. He said he's my father." A silence opened between them, fragile and enormous. What followed were blurred hours, emergency protocols, paperwork, scattered passengers being herded through security lines and corralled into the waiting area of Portland's modest airport terminal. Flights rerouted, luggage misplaced, and whispered frustrations weaving through the crowd like static. Emma sat alone, adrift in the noise, the photo resting on her lap, the key still gripped like an anchor. Her eyes drifted again to the photograph, a smiling couple, youthful, carefree, her mother, Sarah, and the man she'd always believed to be her father, Thomas Wilson. The man she'd mourned since age 4, whose name she carried in her heart, whose grave she'd visited every birthday. How could that man not be her father? The photo didn't lie. Or did it? She blinked hard and turned it over. Still the same. A frozen smile, a past she thought she understood. Then Harrison's words returned again. "Ask your grandmother about July 17th, 1992, Emma's breath caught. She was born in March of 1993, 8 months later. The timing sent a chill through her veins, colder than the airport's overactive air conditioning. "Mind if I sit?" Grace was back, holding 2 paper cups. The steam rising from them smelled like hot chocolate. Emma nodded. Grace eased into the seat beside her and handed one over. Sugar and warmth, good for shock. Emma wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful. She hadn't even realized how cold she'd become. They sat together, wordless, letting the white noise of airline chaos fill the space. It was Grace who finally broke the silence. "Want to talk about it?" Emma hesitated. They were strangers, seatmates, nothing more. And yet Grace had already seen her unravel. What harm could there be in confiding a little further? She took a breath. "I don't know how any of this could be true. My dad was Thomas Wilson. I have his pictures. I remember him. He died when I was 4. Grace listened, her hands quietly cradling her own cup. Emma went on. "And now this man, William Harrison, who I've never met, says he's my biological father. How can that be?" Grace leaned back slightly, her tone gentle but steady. "Family's messy, sweetheart. Messier than most people ever admit. Secrets get kept for all kinds of reasons, sometimes out of love, sometimes out of fear. But if William is my real father, who was Thomas? And why would my mother or my grandmother lie to me all this time?" "I don't know," Grace admitted, "but I've lived long enough to learn that most people aren't villains in their own story. They do the best they can, even when that best causes pain." Emma looked down at the photo again. "My mum disappeared when I was 7. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. Grandma always said she had troubles, but she never explained what." Her voice faltered, tears threatening again. She bit them back, setting her jaw. Grace touched her arm gently. "What are you going to do?" Emma tightened her grip on the key. "I have to get to Boston. The lawyers there, Harrison's lawyers, I guess, they must know something. And after that, I need to talk to my grandmother, face to face." Before Grace could respond, the overhead speaker chimed to life. "Attention passengers of American Airlines Flight 2187. A recovery aircraft is now available for departure to Boston Logan International Airport. Boarding will begin in approximately 1 hour at Gate 3. Around them, a wave of relieved movement stirred the stranded passengers. Emma didn't move. "What about Mr. Harrison?" she asked. "Did they say anything about his condition?" Grace shook her head. "Not officially, but I spoke to one of the paramedics when they came back for equipment. They said he's at Maine Medical Center. That's all I got." Emma's mind raced. "I have to see him before we go." "Honey, the hospital's 20 minutes from here. There's no way we'd make it there and back before the flight boards. I'm sorry. But what if he dies?" The words exploded from Emma, startling them both. "What if he dies before I get the answers? Before I know if any of this is even real?" She didn't realize she was standing until Grace gently tugged her back down beside her. Grace studied her carefully. "Wait here. Let me see what I can do." She rose and walked toward the airline staff. Emma watched every gesture, every nod, every hand movement like a lifeline unraveling in slow motion. The agent at first looked unmoved, even skeptical, but then softened, began typing. A few minutes later, Grace returned. "Good news and bad news," she said, her expression unreadable. Emma sat up straight. "Good news. Mr. Harrison is stable. Admitted to cardiac for observation. He's conscious, talking." A flood of relief surged through Emma. "And the bad?" "No time to visit. The hospital's too far. Security won't let us back through if we leave now." Emma's shoulders sagged. It made sense, but it felt wrong. How could she fly to Boston not knowing? "But," Grace continued with a small smile, "I told them you were family." Just a little white lie. "They're going to ask if he can take a phone call. If he can, they'll bring him a cordless phone." Emma's eyes lit up. "Seriously? We'll know in a few minutes. And Emma, if you get that call, make it count." She nodded, already rifling through the maze of questions in her mind. Just then, a woman in airline uniform approached. "Miss Reynolds," she said, "we have Mr. Harrison for you."
Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. She took the phone with trembling hands and stepped aside. Her fingers barely gripped it. "Hello," she whispered. "Emma." Harrison's voice was faint but steady. "Thank you for calling. Are you really my father?" The words slipped out raw and unfiltered. There was a pause. "Yes," he said quietly. "Biologically, yes, I am." Emma swayed. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair. "My father, Thomas Wilson. He was my father. Everyone said I looked like him." "Thomas was a good man," Harrison said, his voice heavy with reverence. "He worked with your mother. When our relationship ended, Thomas stepped in. He loved her. And when she found out she was pregnant, he offered to marry her, give you his name, his home." Emma's throat thickened. "But why? Why would he do that?" "Because he was kind. And I wasn't in a place to be," Harrison admitted. "I was married, wealthy. Your mother was young, alone. Thomas gave you the family I couldn't." Emma pressed a hand to her forehead. "Did you even want me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A long silence. "I didn't know about you until later," Harrison said, his voice thick. "Your mother made that choice. By the time I found out, you already had a father. Good one." Emma closed her eyes. "Then why now? Why am I being called to Boston? Why were you even on my flight?" "The lawyers in Boston, they work for me," Harrison admitted. "When I heard your grandmother was sick, I realized I couldn't put off anymore." "In airport, phone area, day. Harrison, VO. It's time you knew the truth, Emma. I can finally give you choices I couldn't before." Emma, tight voice. "The inheritance, it's real?" Harrison, VO. "It is. I've set up a trust in your name for education, housing, whatever you might need." The weight of it hit Emma like a crashing wave. The idea that this man, this stranger, had been watching her, knowing about Grandma's illness, arranging her future from the shadows, it ignited a spark of anger. "Emma, you've been watching me all this time?" Harrison, VO. "Not directly. I respected the boundaries Sarah and Thomas set. But yes, I made sure you were safe, that you had opportunities." His voice softened with sincerity. Harrison, VO. "So indeed, I donated anonymously to your school, the community center. It was the least I could do." Emma's mind reeled. The center that had taken care of her after school while Grandma was in chemo. The school that somehow found funding for the advanced math program despite all the cuts. Everything started clicking into place. Invisible strings woven through her life. "Emma, and my mother? Do you know where she is? Why she left?" A heavy silence. Harrison, VO. "That's a conversation best had in person. When I'm better. It's complicated." "Emma, everything about this is complicated. B, I deserve the truth. All of it." Harrison, VO. "You do, and you will. But not like this. Not over a rush call in an airport." Harrison, VO. "So indeed, the key I gave you, it opens a safe deposit box at Boston Federal Central Branch. Inside is a letter from your mother, written before she left. It will explain more than I ever could." Emma froze. A letter from her mother, waiting all these years. The airline staffer, Miss Reynolds, gestured gently. "Miss Reynolds, they're beginning the boarding process. Miss, we need to wrap up." Emma nodded, returning to phone. "Emma, I have to go." Harrison, VO. "I understand." His voice wavered now, strained, weaker than before. Harrison, VO. "So indeed. Emma, I know this is a lot. You have every right to be angry, confused. But please, go to Boston. Meet the lawyers. Read the letter. And if you're open to it, I'd like to talk in person." The intercom crackled. "Priority boarding now underway. Emma, I need to think about all this. It's a lot." Harrison, VO. "Of course." There was resignation in his voice, but something else too. Hope. Harrison, VO. "So indeed. Whatever you decide, whatever you think of me after all this, just know I've never stopped thinking about you, wishing things had been different." The words cracked through her defenses. This man she'd written off as cold and distant now sounded human, broken, honest. "Emma, I have to go." Harrison, VO. "Goodbye, Emma. Be safe." Emma handed the phone back. Her mind spun. New truths, new questions. In boarding area, continuous. Grace stepped beside her, eyes filled with concern. "Grace, how are you holding up?" Emma, quietly. "It feels like I just walked into someone else's life. Nothing makes sense anymore." Grace nodded knowingly. "Grace, family secrets, they turn your world upside down. But you're strong, Emma. Whatever you discover in Boston, whatever you choose to do with that truth, you'll find your way." In airplane return flight day. No emergencies this time. No storm clouds. Just a quiet hum of engines. Emma sat by the window, replaying everything. Harrison's voice, the letter, the truth waiting in a locked box in Boston. Earlier, the lawyer, Mr. Edwards, had handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, details of the trust, contact information, and her mother's letter. "Mr. Edwards," flashback, "your grandmother will meet you at baggage claim. Mr. Harrison wanted to come, but thought his presence might complicate things. He asked me to remind you, everything moves forward at your pace." The gesture was kind, and yet Emma felt a tug of disappointment. Part of her had wanted to see him again, to confirm the connection was real. In Louisville Airport baggage claim. Evening. Her eyes scanned the crowd. And then Grandma Martha, thinner than before, wearing her Sunday hat. Even though it was Wednesday, clutching her purse, scanning the arrivals, Emma broke into a run. Emma, Grandma, Martha, there's my girl. They embraced. That familiar perfume, that grounding warmth. Emma, muffled, I missed you so much. Martha, Lord, I missed you something fierce. They didn't let go for a long time. EXT, Trailer Park, sunset. The gravel crunched under their feet. The hills rolled in golden light. As they turned down their road, Emma blinked. A crowd was gathered at their trailer. Mrs. Parker, Mr. Jenkins, Lily and her mom, Pastor Green. A hand-painted sign fluttered. Welcome home, Emma. Emma, what is all this? Martha, just folks who missed you. Word got around. Neighbors shared paper plates and stories. Lily peppered her with questions. Pastor Green led a quick prayer. It was ordinary, unfancy, real, and it felt like home. In trailer, porch night. The crowd had gone. Dishes clinked in the kitchen. Emma sat on the porch swing. Fireflies danced in the twilight. The weight of Boston still clung to her, but felt manageable. Martha joined her. The swing creaked under them. They rocked in silence. Martha, you want to talk about it? Emma hesitated. Then, Emma, I told him maybe we could start with phone calls, emails, just to see if there's anything worth building. Martha nodded. Martha, and how do you feel about that? Emma, confused, angry sometimes, at him, at Mom, even at you. She peeked at her grandmother, afraid of hurting her. But Martha just nodded again. Martha, that's fair. Anger's natural when you find out you've been lied to, even if the lie came from love. Emma, but I'm curious, too, about him, about that whole side of the family, about maybe having more people in my corner. Martha, that's natural, too. Family's messy, Emma. Always has been, always will be. It's not just blood, it's choice, commitment, showing up. Martha, so indeed. Thomas showed up. I tried. Maybe Harrison's trying now. Whether that means anything, only time will tell. Emma let those words settle. Emma, I don't have to figure everything out right now, do I? Martha, Lord, no. You're 12, baby girl. You've got your whole life ahead to decide what William Harrison means to you. They rocked in silence again. Distant dogs barked. A child was called inside. A car stereo passed with a low beat. Emma, we're still in C, Mom, right? In Arizona? Martha, yes, indeed. Harrison called. If the doctors give the okay, we'll fly out next month. The thought of seeing her mother after 5 years, now with the full truth, sent a wave of emotion to Emma. Fear, hope, a longing that had never left. And for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could face it. Would she even recognize me? Emma asked softly. Would she be lucid enough to have a real conversation? Would seeing her help heal the wound she left, or just tear it wide open again? Martha considered her granddaughter's questions with the same quiet seriousness she brought to every difficult truth. She has good days, she said gently. On those days, she's almost herself again, curious, smart, asking about you, about everything. But there are harder days too. Days when she's confused, distant, even paranoid, like the world doesn't make sense anymore. Emma's throat tightened. Does she know that Harrison contacted me? That I'm learning the truth? Yes, Martha replied. I told her after you called from Boston. She was having a good day. Thankfully, she was worried, of course, but also relieved, I think. Carrying secrets, especially with mind already strained, is like dragging a chain through deep water. It wears you down. The realization that her mother knew, that she had processed all of this in her own fractured way, added a new layer to Emma's already tangled emotions. It wasn't just about her and Harrison anymore, or even her, Harrison, and Martha. Her mother, distant and damaged, was still part of this constellation, a ghost in the system, still orbiting. Do you think we'll ever be a normal family? Emma asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. She winced at how naive they sounded. Martha smiled, the kind of smile you give a question asked from the heart, even if the answer is complicated. Sweetheart, there's no such thing as a normal family. Every family has its storms and scars. Some just do a better job of hiding them. She reached over and gently patted Emma's hand. But if what you mean is, will we find something that feels right, something that gives you love and stability, then yes, I believe we will. It might not look like the family you imagined. It might include people you never expected and leave out some you thought would always be there. But we'll find our way. That quiet confidence, delivered without fanfare or false promises, calmed something in Emma more deeply than any grand reassurance ever could. 3 weeks later, on a sweltering July morning, the fragile balance of their world collapsed. Emma woke to find her grandmother unable to rise from bed. Her breathing was shallow and ragged, her skin a ghostly pale and clammy to the touch. I'm fine, Martha whispered hoarsely, waving away Emma's panic. Just need a bit of rest, that's all. But Emma wasn't convinced. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911. The paramedics arrived minutes later, efficient and unsmiling. They moved fast, attaching monitors, administering oxygen, speaking in clipped clinical terms that Emma couldn't understand, but instead instinctively knew were bad. "We need to transport her immediately," one paramedic said, already prepping a stretcher. "Pack a small bag if you're riding with us." What followed was a blur. Hospital corridors that smelled like bleach and uncertainty. Waiting rooms that echoed with the silence of fear. Doctors who spoke in cautious but serious tones. "Pneumonia," they said, "complicated by a compromised immune system from cancer treatments." She was admitted to the ICU, surrounded by machines that beeped steadily, as if trying to anchor her life one fragile second at a time. Emma sat at her grandmother's bedside, holding her hand, aching at how small Martha looked beneath the layers of hospital linens. "She's stable for now," the doctor finally told her that evening, "but the situation is serious." He paused. "Do you have someone who can stay with you? A parent or adult relative?" Emma shook her head. "It's just me and my grandma." The doctor frowned. "I see. I'll have social services come speak with you about temporary arrangements." Those two words, temporary arrangements, sliced through her like a blade. Foster care, the shadow that had hovered at the edges of her life since her mother disappeared, kept at bay only by Martha's fierce love and determination. Now, that fragile shield was cracking. As the sun sank behind the hospital windows and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, Emma sat alone in the ICU waiting room. Her thoughts raced, her chest tight with fear. She pulled out her phone and stared at a number she had programmed but never dared to call. William Harrison's private line. Her thumb hovered. Would he even answer? Would he care? Or had his interest in her been nothing more than a momentary flicker of guilt, already fading before she could decide? A nurse stepped into the room. "Emma, there's a call for you at the nurse's station. A Mr. Harrison." Emma blinked. "But I didn't call him." The nurse shrugged. "He says he's a relative. Said he was notified about your grandmother's admission." Emma followed the nurse to the phone, uncertainty twisting in her stomach. "Hello?" she said, her voice hesitant. "Emma." Harrison's voice was clear, steady, stronger than it had been in that Portland hospital room. "I just heard about Martha. How is she?" Emma didn't answer his question. "How did you know?" A pause. "I asked to be notified if either of you were ever admitted to a hospital in the region. It was a precaution, considering Martha's condition." A wave of indignation surged through her. How dare he monitor us without asking? But just as quickly, the anger dissolved into reluctant gratitude. At least someone was paying attention. "She has pneumonia," Emma said quietly. "They say she's stable, but it's serious. They want to talk to me about other arrangements." "I see." His voice grew softer, more deliberate. "Emma, I could be there by morning. I'll bring in a top pulmonary specialist to consult on her case. And while we're there, we can figure out the best plan for you." "You don't have to do that," she said reflexively. "I know I don't. I want to." Another pause. "But only if you're comfortable with it. If you prefer I didn't come, I'll respect that." The fact that he left the choice in her hands tipped the balance. "Yes," Emma said, almost in a whisper. I think that would be good. Thank you." True to his word, William Harrison arrived at 7 a.m. the next morning. Gone was a high-powered executive in tailored suits. In his place was a man in a simple button-down shirt and khakis, shadows beneath his eyes betraying a sleepless night. But what struck Emma most was the absence of assumption. He made no move to hug her, didn't even reach out. He simply acknowledged her presence with a nod of genuine concern. "How is she?" "About the same," Emma replied. "They let me in 10 minutes every hour." He nodded. "I've arranged for Dr. Patterson from Johns Hopkins to review her case. She's one of the country's leading pulmonologists. She'll call the attending physician shortly." Emma's gut tensed at his casual mention of elite resources. The kind of privilege that could open doors without even knocking. "The doctors here are doing everything they can," she said, defensive. "I'm sure they are," he said quickly. "The consultation is just to make sure every stone is turned." He gestured to the chair beside her. "May I?" Emma nodded, and he sat, maintaining a respectful distance. "Have you eaten? Slept?" She shook her head. "There's a decent cafe across the street," Harrison offered. "Why don't we grab something small? We'll leave our numbers at the desk. Be back in 15 minutes. It was such a normal, kind suggestion, one rooted in immediate care, not sweeping solutions, that Emma found herself agreeing. They walked side by side, Harrison matching her pace exactly. No rush, no pressure, just presence. Over pancakes she mostly pushed around her plate, he finally addressed the unspoken. "I've spoken with Robert Edwards about your guardianship. In case Martha needs a longer recovery, I want you to know foster care is not on the table." Emma's spine stiffened. "I'm not going into foster care. No one is suggesting that," he said calmly. "There are options. My sister Charlotte lives in Nashville, not far from here. She's a literature professor at Vanderbilt. She's known about you since the beginning." Emma blinked. "Your sister knows I exist?" "She does. She's been hoping to meet you for years. I just never gave her the chance." The idea that a blood relative, an aunt, had known about her all this time made something shift inside her. Yet another piece in the broken mosaic of her family. "Another option," Harrison continued, "is Mrs. Parker, your former teacher. Your mother mentioned her in letters. She lives nearby, and she might be willing to serve as a temporary guardian. That would mean you could stay close close to home. Emma stared at him. A man who once seemed like a stranger was now quietly offering her a network of lifelines. Choices, not ultimatums. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel cornered. She felt seen. Emma stirred her food without appetite, her thoughts far from the hospital cafeteria's pale green walls. She remembered Mrs. Parker's welcome home chicken and dumplings after her 6th grade science fair win. Comforting, warm, simple. That same kind smile had greeted them yesterday outside their trailer. A plate of lemon bars in hand, like nothing had changed. But everything had. "You've been talking to Grandma behind my back," Emma said suddenly, her fork clinking too hard against the plate. Harrison didn't deny it. He only shifted in his chair, his posture careful. "Not behind your back. Exactly. Your grandmother and I have had a few conversations about contingency plans." Contingency. The word felt sterile, like it belonged on a spreadsheet, not in her life. "She's been clear about what she wants," Harrison continued gently, "to keep you in your community, to minimize disruption, make sure your education continues uninterrupted. I've offered resources to help make that possible." Emma pushed her tray away, her appetite soured by frustration. Not with Harrison, not entirely, but with everything. The swirl of secrets, the years of not knowing, the illness looming over Martha, the ever-changing shape of her family. "I'm tired of people making decisions for me," she said, her voice rising, trembling. "My whole life has been adults keeping secrets and telling me it's for my own good, without ever asking what I want." Harrison didn't flinch. He nodded, accepting the weight of her words. "You're right," he said simply, "and I'm sorry I added to that. So tell me, Emma, what do you want? Not what you think your grandmother wants, or what you think I want to hear. What you want." The question stunned her. There was no trace of condescension in his tone, just quiet sincerity. He meant it. What did she want? She blinked, trying to narrow her swirling thoughts. In the immediate term, she wanted Martha to get better. "But beyond that, I want to stay in school with my friends," she said slowly, each word carefully selected. "I want to keep living in our trailer, even if it's not fancy. I want to see my mom and understand why she left. I want to know more about you, about Charlotte, but I don't want to leave Kentucky." She paused, a lump rising in her throat. "And I want people to stop lying to me, even when the truth is messy." Harrison nodded. "Those are reasonable wants," he said softly. "I can't promise Martha's recovery. That's beyond anyone's control. But I can promise this. I'll support whatever plan keeps you rooted where you are. I'll help you visit your mother. I'll introduce you to Charlotte when you're ready. And I'll be honest with you, even when it's hard." He leaned in, his eyes steady. "Emma, no matter what happened with Martha, you won't be alone. There are people, myself included, if you allow it, who will make sure you're cared for, educated, and safe." Emma studied him, searching for catch, for the self-serving Glen adults so often try to hide. But there was nothing like that in Harrison's face. Only exhaustion, sincerity, and hope. "Okay," she whispered, barely audible. "Let's go see if the doctor has any updates." The facility outside Sedona was nothing like Emma imagined. Not the cold, gray hospital hallways from movies. No clanging carts or fluorescent buzz. Instead, it looked like a desert retreat. Low adobe buildings nestled into red rock cliffs. Flowering cacti blooming along quiet paths. Birds flitted between courtyards. Everything about the place seemed designed to soothe. Dr. Littlefeather, her mother's psychiatrist, met them at the main entrance. "Your mother's having a good day," she said. "She's been preparing for this visit for weeks, practicing grounding techniques, learning how to stay present." Emma swallowed hard. Will she know me?" The doctor's eyes softened. "Yes, she'll know you. Memory is not the issue. Your mother remembers you clearly. The challenge is staying emotionally connected. When feelings overwhelm her, she sometimes steps back, not because she doesn't care, but because her mind is protecting itself." The word stayed with Emma as they walked through the atrium, sunlight pouring through skylights onto potted succulents and peaceful sitting areas. They exited into a quiet courtyard where Sarah Reynolds sat alone, sketchpad balanced on her knees. She hadn't seen them yet. Her hair had grown out. No longer the short practical cut Emma remembered, but soft curls catching the sun. She was thinner, smaller somehow, but still unmistakable. And then she turned. The dimple in her right cheek appeared, the one Emma saw in her own mirror every morning. "Emma," Sarah breathed, her voice fragile with wonder. The sketch pad slid from her lap as she stood. "Oh my God, look at you." They moved toward each other slowly, as if afraid too much haste might shatter the moment. And when they embraced, time folded in on itself. Emma clung to the smell of lavender shampoo, unfamiliar but welcome, to the feel of fragile arms around her back, to the quiet sob that trembled from her mother's chest into her own. "Mom," Emma whispered, one syllable, 5 years worth of emotion packed into that single word.
"You've grown so much," Sarah said, stepping back just enough to see her. "You're not my little girl anymore." "I'm still me," Emma replied, needing her mother to know that. "Yes," Sarah said, "still my brave, brilliant girl, just taller now, more yourself." Martha had stayed a respectful distance during the reunion, watching with misted eyes and a trembling chin. Now she stepped forward. "Sarah," she said gently, "you're looking well." "Mama," Sarah said, voice cracking slightly. She reached out and grasped her mother's hand while keeping the other firmly on Emma's shoulder. "Thank you for taking care of her, for bringing her." The three of them stood there, 3 generations of Reynolds women, bound together by love, pain, distance, and reunion. A triangle of connection carved from years of silence and sacrifice. They sat beneath a pergola wrapped in desert vines. Sarah had been waiting for this moment, that much was clear. Their conversation drifted through topics: Emma's classes, the neighborhood, funny stories about Martha's Sunday crossword addiction. The rhythm felt almost normal, but beneath it all ran an undercurrent of everything unspoken. Eventually, Sarah touched the edge of the silence. "You know about William now?" she said. Emma nodded. "We met in Boston, and again when Grandma got sick." "Are you angry with me?" Sarah asked, watching her closely. "For not telling you sooner?" Emma thought for a moment. I was, a little. But he was there when it mattered. He made things easier. He didn't have to. "No, he didn't," Sarah said softly. "But I'm glad he did." She reached for Emma's hand. "William has his flaws, like all of us, but there's good in him, more than he lets most people see." "He said he visits you," Emma offered. Sarah smiled faintly. "Every few months. At first I refused. Then I got curious. This place makes it feel safe, controlled. We mostly talk about you. He brings photos, tells me about school events, your plays, the community center." Emma stared at her. "You've both been watching me all this time." "Yes," Sarah said, "in our own ways, wanting the best for you, even if we didn't always agree on what that looked like." As the visit wound down, Dr. Littlefeather signaled gently from across the courtyard. Sarah was nearing her emotional limit. "Can I come back?" Emma asked, voice hushed. "I would like that very much," Sarah said. "Now that we've reconnected, there's space to build something. Not frequent visits, perhaps, but regular ones. Something real." The promise of that, of building something imperfect but real, filled Emma with hope she hadn't let herself feel in years. As summer faded into fall, Emma's life reshaped itself. Martha recovered, slowly but steadily, now with extra help at home thanks to Harrison's trust. And every few months, Arizona called. Sometimes she went with Martha, sometimes alone. Edward's office made the logistics seamless. The visits gave Emma a chance to learn her mother not just as a memory or a myth, but as a person, flawed, fragile, fierce in her own quiet way. And in time, Emma began to feel whole. Narrator, closing reflection. In our later years, we often look back on roads not taken and words left unsaid. We think silence protects our loved ones, but sometimes silence cuts deeper than the truth ever could. Emma's story reminds us that it's never too late to bridge the gaps between us. Maybe there's someone in your life waiting to hear the truth or to finally speak theirs. A child, a sibling, a friend. Don't wait for a diagnosis or a crisis to make the call. As Martha once said, Basia, family ain't just who you're born to, it's who shows up when you fall. Dear friend, if you've been carrying a truth in your heart, today might be the day to speak it. The very thing you fear, vulnerability, might just be the bridge to healing. Because some wounds take more than a band-aid to heal. And some families are forged not by blood, but by truth.